To the club. All right, it's good to see you. We took a week break, of course, for Hanukkah, and we are ready to restart and continue chapter 12, which chapter 12, as I mentioned last time, is very important. It's kind of the end of the subject, putting together who we are, what's our inner core, what's our inner feelings, what makes me, as we discussed, the godly soul, the animal soul, and finally getting to the how that plays out in who becomes righteous, who is wicked, who is intermediate. And that brought us to the discussion last week of the intermediate person, who is, of course, somebody who has control over their actions, not much control over their inner self. It's very weird. Sorry, on my screen, everything looks a second off, so whatever. I'll live with it. So this week, actually, as I looked over the class, most of the class is actually rehashing ideas that we actually have spoken about throughout the classes, maybe not in text, but outside. So we're going to be very text heavy this week because a lot of the topics at hand have actually been discussed. A lot of times I explain something before we read it inside because the way that Tanya is written may be confused because it's being written as a scholarly treatise trying to build up an idea, which sometimes puts it out of order of what you might normally think. And therefore, sometimes I might explain ideas out of order. So today's Tanya will mostly not be new information, but of course, repetition is good. There are going to be two important points that might be a little bit new. One is about how the prayer affects the rest of our day, although I did discuss it last time. But the last thing that's going to discuss in the class when we get to the end is also new, which is how all of this discussion affects our interpersonal lives, because a lot of what we've been discussing is our lives and connections to God. And there's going to be a thing at the end about our interpersonal lives. As you may well understand, we have been discussing this Benoni and his level of mind control. And so that brings me to today's joke. And that is, did you hear about the mind-controlling air freshener? Did anybody hear about it? This new product, this mind-controlling air freshener?
No.
It really makes sense when you think about it.
Oh, no. Oh.
All right, sorry.
That's good.
Okay, hopefully you'll all recover from that one.
I'm glad they missed it.
Yeah. Okay. So it's quite the joke, but anyways, I was Googling, there actually is a genre called Rabbi jokes. There are like joke books out there called Rabbi jokes.
Oh, yeah.
There's corny jokes, there's dad jokes, and then there's Rabbi jokes. It's all different.
Is that the kosher version of the dad joke, I guess?
I guess so. Yeah. They're called Rabbi.
Yeah.
Take all the clean dad jokes and they become Rabbi jokes.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
You.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to jump right into, if you have the time, it's going to be on page 145. And we're going to discuss why, even though the Benoni, the intermediate person, does not do anything wrong, nevertheless, they are not a tzaddik. And we're going to explain because their control only lays in their actions or their speech or their thoughts, but not their inner core, which what difference does it make? You say if you control your thoughts, and as we explained the last couple of times, that if you can control what you think about at any given moment, but the thoughts that pop into your mind are not at your control, and that's a sign of the animalistic soul. So the urges still arise even in a Benoni. So let's take a look here at the text. So it says like this. Nevertheless, despite absolute mastery over thought, speech, and action, this person could not in any way be classified as a tzaddik. He is neither a complete tzaddik nor an incomplete tzaddik, because this advantage of the divine soul's light, that it automatically, let's turn the page, that it automatically dispels the darkness and foolishness of the klipa, the uncleanliness in animal soul, function. Good to see you, Nina. Functions only at a superficial layers of the soul in the three garments mentioned above, of thought, speech, and action. But it does not help the deep core of the divine soul in its war against the deep core of the animal soul, which is from the klipa of Noga. So in other words, you can be great, you can control all your urges, but you have not gotten rid of the enemy. My example that I keep going back to is, imagine you are an army, you are defending your city, you're within the walls of your city, you have not allowed the enemy to enter the city, but the enemy keeps throwing projectiles at you, keeps throwing arrows at you, shoot them down, nothing enters your city, but they are attacking and they're still there and they're actively attacking you. That is what the Beinoni is. The Beinoni is constantly being attacked by their animalistic soul. And a tzaddik would be someone who has vanquished the enemy. There is even no enemy trying to attack their city. Here it gives another example. Imagine that in a debate, you utterly refute one of your opponent's arguments with an intelligent comment over which everyone is in agreement. To every foolish argument he raises, you have an intelligent counter-argument. You may win the debate, but you've only succeeded in deflecting his attacks. It is unlikely you've actually convinced your opponent that you are right. Thus, the opponent still exists. You've deflected that person. Now, this is, by the way, just a side commentary. This is an important topic in politics. When we think we're going to convince people out of long-held beliefs in a matter of minutes is simply foolish. I'm not saying we should never have debates, but we have to put it in context, and to think that foolishly we're going to convince people in a moment, to convince them that what they've been thinking their entire life is wrong is simply ridiculous. It goes, by the way, also as a rabbi. If I were to truly believe that I can convince people of what I'm trying to tell them in one discussion to entirely change their life in one moment, I'd have to be silly. The change happens slowly over time. They may agree to explore it more. I can get that in a discussion, but to believe that people will just let go. I mean, this happens all the time. We give a Tanya class and we may present a new idea that you may never thought of it in that way. You've grown up thinking one way, and to imagine that people will just change like that is a fantasy, in my opinion. Obviously, I'm going to present an idea, and it's something, as I think one of our members here in the class always says after the class, Rabbi, there's a lot to think about, things take time. So the Beinoni is fighting the animalistic soul. The animalistic soul is not just going to back down just because you won this round of the war. Now, it is true, if you're truly a Beinoni, most likely over time, the animalistic soul will not be as powerful, but it'll still be there. But let's continue. Good to see you, Baruch. You missed the joke. I'll have to repeat it for you. The same is true of every Beinoni. To every attack from his animal soul.
That's okay. It'll be my Mesiris Nefesh.
Okay. If you stick around long enough to the end of the class, you'll be rewarded. It'll help you get extra reward in the world to come. The same is true of the Beinoni. To every attack from his animal soul, the Beinoni has an effective counterattack from the wisdom and light of his divine soul, but that does not mean that his animal soul has been convinced by his divine soul. I think, by the way, this is a really important point. Again, there's the intellectual side of the Tanya, which we've been discussing, and what it means to be a Beinoni, and a Beinoni means you cannot replace your animalistic soul. But I think it's also important in our lives, as I mentioned a couple times, but this brings it to the fore again and again as well, that don't take your skepticism and your doubts about what you're doing as a sign that what you're doing is wrong, necessarily. We may always have skepticism and doubts, and that could be because the animalistic soul is always there. And as in a Hasidic talk, we talk a lot of times that the easiest thing to do is to pour cold water in anything, meaning cool someone down. You can just tell someone, oh, well, maybe not. Well, why? You don't really have to. There's the easiest words, the easiest thing to say. You just tell someone, just just this one time, don't do it. We call it coldness in Judaism. Judaism requires warmth. So what I'm just pointing out here is a simple lesson we take from the Beinoni, even if we are personally not Beinonim, is to recognize that our doubts are not necessarily indicative that what we're doing is wrong. If we have the conviction that what we're doing is right, the doubt may just be creeping in from the animalistic soul. And as long as we are convinced of the truth of our ideas, or at least with the conviction, we can choose to ignore those attacks that come to us in the various different ways. So that's just an important thing to point out. But let's continue. Because in the Beinoni, the animal soul's emotional deep core of the klipa in the heart's left chamber has not been displaced at all, right? We said the Beinoni is someone who completely still has the animalistic soul, except it you control its actions. Now here's going to point to something that if you came to the Kabbalah class number 4, you'll know what it's talking about. And it says like this: the primordial shattering of vessels caused damage to the. I'm sorry, there's this box here. How do I get rid of it? No. I'll lower this. The primordial shattering of vessels caused damage primarily to the universe's emotions. That is the inner reason why the Beinoni is unable to heal the deep core of the animal soul, which is emotional in nature. This cosmic flaw will be healed only with the Messianic era or close to it. So I'm not going to delve into that. If you came to class number 4, the shattering of vessels, you may understand what that's saying, but we'll leave it at that. Now he's going to continue to talk. We're talking about this Beinoni, and he's going to say, because if you recall, we said earlier, a Beinoni, when they pray, the animal soul goes into retreat. And as I mentioned in our class, we all have times in our lives when we feel our animal soul has gone into retreat, and we may, what they say, it's like the eye of the storm. You may then mistakenly think, oh, look, I'm all good, right? And then suddenly things come back at you. You have to remember it's the eye of the storm, and this is exactly what happens with the Beinoni. When the Beinoni prays in a moment of deep devotion and connection with God, you may not feel your animal soul at all, and you may feel unhealed. But as he's going to say, but just remember, right after the prayers are over, right after that moment of deep connection is over, the animal soul is going to come back with extreme force. He says like this: and as we have seen this become evidence after prayer, when his fiery, flaming love for God is no longer awakened in his heart in the right chamber, then the dormant klipa being the unclean side and the left side, which was silenced during prayer, reawakens. This doesn't mean the Beinoni's divine soul doesn't shine at all after prayer, and that he doesn't love God all day. It's only that during prayer, the love is intense enough to saturate all of his heart and completely quiet his animal soul, whereas during the rest of the day, the divine soul's voice, while present, is more muted. I also want to point out another important thing we get from here is that emotions fluctuate. That's what you see clearly from here. In our lives, we may be disturbed sometimes because our emotions are always fluctuating. What we feel now, we may not feel in 5 minutes from now, and in 10 minutes from now. Emotions don't necessarily always have balance, and that's okay. That's perfectly fine. The main thing is to get your head in the right place and effectively try to use your emotions in the proper way when you can. But as we see here, your emotions fluctuate. During prayer, you're in a rapture with God, and then suddenly you're not in a rapture with God, and you want to wonder why, and that's okay. It's the nature of how we're built. We're built with the mind that controls the heart, but we have 2 hearts. And sometimes the godly heart is in control, sometimes the animal heart is in control, and the animal heart is a completely wild one. Did I ever show the video of the mind walking the heart? Did I ever show you that video?
I don't remember.
You don't remember it? Okay, all right. I'll show it. I'll show it a little soon. It's just a 1-minute video. It's cute, but it brings out the idea. After prayer, during the rest of the day, the Beinoni's heart is inlaid inside with love, but only in milder form of love, known as Ava Masutera, dormant love, which is the innate love of the divine soul, which everyone naturally experiences, as will be explained there in chapters 18, 19, and 44. So what he's trying to say here is like this, or what he is saying here is like this, is that don't think that your prayers were a waste of time. Your prayers, after you pray, even if your love is not at full strength, nevertheless, the prayers have awakened the love within you to the point where during the rest of the time, that love can carry you over. As I've spoken about, let's take any relationship. Take a relationship of a spouses. If they have moments of great love, then it can carry them through more difficult times. If you have a parent and children, you have friends, all of these things, the moments of great love help for times when you don't have the ability to awaken your great love. Okay. Says like this. Now, he's going to talk here that not only does prayer can also awaken a natural love. Now, the Tanya, I want to give you a heads up. we're going to talk about a little bit about the natural love here, but this is actually not the place where we're going to talk about it. The hidden love and the natural love is going to be more of a discussion in chapter 19. It's not so important right now, but nevertheless, I'm going to read this paragraph. It says, every divine soul possesses a natural love for God. In some individuals, this may be hidden and obscured by selfish interest of the animal soul, but it is always present. That's what's called hidden love, to stress that everyone has it, even if it is not yet manifest. But it is not always hidden. In fact, the Beinoni, the so-called hidden love, is actually revealed in conscious during the day. Being an innate property of the soul, the hidden love is undeveloped and mild in comparison to the flaming love aroused by meditation and prayer. So let's go back to an example of a parent and child. Parents naturally love their children, but they also should spend time thinking about how much they love their children. Do not rely on natural love. There's one, I don't know, psychologist, therapist, I don't know who says it. It's one of the lines, famous lines says, learn to like the people you love. So what I would say that about God, so to speak, is that, yeah, we love God. It's a deep down innate part of us, but we should learn to like God as well. It's a play in words, of course, meaning really we should love God. But the idea is that we always have a love to God, but we have to work on it sometimes to create that love to God to be in a more powerful way. But back to his discussion here, he says, when you're done praying and your love is now retreated to a more hidden place, it's not flaming. Now your animal soul will wake up, and he says like this, and then after prayer, when the more intense love subsides, it becomes possible for the stupidity of the fool. That's what the evil inclination is called in Ecclesiastes, the evil chamber of the animal soul, to be expressed in the left chamber of his heart, to desire temptations of everything in the physical world, whether they be permitted or, God forbid, prohibited. Now it is as if he had not prayed at all. The tzaddik is not tempted by pleasure of this world as a pursuit in itself, since he finds the notion of unadulterated self-gratification disgusting. The Beinoni, on the other hand, is still drawn to this type of activity. Okay. So this is the life of the Beinoni as he's been describing it, and as I've given you, and good to see you, David. And he's given us a lot of lessons along the way. Now, we want to make a distinction here. And again, as I said in the beginning of the class, a lot of the topics today are going to be a little bit repetitious of things we discussed in last classes. That's because I've told you something's outside that now he's going to discuss, and I told him because we needed to discuss it there. But nevertheless, we're going to read it again, and it's never a bad thing to hear an important lesson twice. So what he's going to discuss now is that even though he said a moment ago, he said over here that when the Beinoni is done praying, he may desire even things that are forbidden. He's going to stress that the Beinoni never wallows. The Beinoni never wallows in the in those feelings. Okay, so if the Beinoni has a desire to do something forbidden, all that means, as I've said before, it's the knee-jerk reaction. It's the Beinoni is desiring to do something wrong, and then right away he shuts it down. And that's what we're going to discuss now. Why is this important? Because even if we're never going to be 100% a Beinoni, we can be partially a Beinoni. What that means is we have to recognize that thoughts of doing sins are a problem. And we also should avoid that, even if I may never be 100% successful, but I have to know what I can do. In other words, I'll put it like this. We're discussing a Beinoni which sounds like a mythical creature almost. And in some ways, right? He's this person who has so many desires, right? It almost sounds like a tzaddik's life is easier, right? A tzaddik has no bad desires, right? This Beinoni is almost a mythical creature. He's full of desires, full of feelings of wanting to do wrong, and always in control of himself. Sounds very hard. It sounds like a rough, right? It's like how long can you hold yourself back? Right? I mean, how can you manage that? I mean, that sounds like a very stressful life if you never give in. So my first answer, of course, the Beinoni is probably somebody who hopefully spends a lot of time on their spirituality, and over time, which is really what the Tanya discusses. The Tanya will discuss, we do have the ability to change ourselves over time, maybe not 100%. We cannot become a tzaddik, But to some extent, we can rein in our animalistic soul. And as I've said many times, you can see this in your own lives. If you're on a diet, certain things that you liked, you don't like anymore, okay? So you can rein in your animal soul to an extent. That's number one. Number two is, of course, like I was saying, this Bain, this intermediate person is a person of very spiritual caliber. But the truth is, it is very rare. For those in Chabad circles, we believe that the ultimate Bainani, the actual being of 100% Bainani, is near impossible. But we can have Bainani moments or Bainani parts of our lives. In other words, there may be certain parts of our lives which are Bainani-like. Even if I'm not in my entirety a Bainani, there may be parts of me that are like a Bainani. For example, when it comes to Yom Kippur, you may be at a place where Yom Kippur to you is like a Bainani. There's no struggle. Yeah, your animal soul may, hey, you want to go eat something, right? But you know right away, no, I'm not going to eat anything, right? You know what I mean? For some people, keeping kosher is just something they do. For some people, keeping Shabbat. For some people, Passover Seder. There's all different areas of our lives that we might be like a Bainani, where even if thoughts come to our mind, we don't entertain any real thought of doing something wrong. And by extension, we can extend that to other areas of our life if we so choose. But what I do want to point out is that don't think that it's just a matter of control, because that's near impossible. In other words, to really think that I'm not going to work on myself, I'm just going to study the Tanya. Tanya tells me you can control, your mind can control your actions. And so therefore, I'm just going to sit here. I'm not going to work on my spirituality. Just every time bad thoughts come to mind, I'm going to push them away because I can. That's a bad long-term solution. The Tanya itself will discuss how ultimately the real goal is to come to a place of love and awe of God. That's really the Tanya's stated purpose. Ultimately, the path to control of ourselves is through love and awe of God. So even though we're going to be reading in this chapter, that's why I want to say this chapter is still part of the technicality part of the Tanya. The first 12 chapters are all the technicalities. Even though this is still part of the technicality part of the Tanya, in other words, it's laying out what it is. It's not laying out how you get there. This part of the Tanya has not really told you yet how you get to where you want to get to. This part of Tanya is laying out the definitions. We've laid out the definition of who you are. We've laid out the definition of your soul. We've laid out the definition of a tzaddik, which you can't be. We've laid out the definition of a rasha, wicked person, which you probably are. And we've now laying out what a Bainani is, which is something which is technically in grasp, probably very hard to get to. And the Tanya, through the rest of the Tanya, will mostly not discuss the Bainani. Okay, we have it in chapter 13 and 14, but that's it. And most of the Tanya is really, how can I move the needle? I'm right now at this level of a rasha. How can I become more Bainani-like? Okay, that's where we're trying to get to. How can we become more Bainani-like? And it's not just a matter, as you might think, if you just studied chapter 12, a matter of self-control. There's a lot more that goes into self-control. Self-control, you have to work on your mind, okay? Just saying self-control is not a great goal. So this is what I just want to caution as we're reading about this mythical Bainani. Recognize that it's a lifetime of work, and the Tanya understands that, and it's not saying, oh, it's just easy. Yeah, just don't think the wrong things, you know? No, the Tanya recognizes it's not easy, and therefore, the Tanya is going to give different pathways of becoming more like a Bainani. But that being said, we are laying the groundwork here. What is a Bainani? And that tells us what it is that I can work towards. Even if my goal is not necessarily to become a Bainani itself, which would be a nice thing, but I don't think I'll get there. But anyways, let's get back in here. Let's talk about what are the ramifications of a Bainani. And so, as I said, a Bainani is someone who never sins actually and maintains complete control. And we're going to say here, they maintain complete control even in their mind, meaning they don't allow thoughts of doing sin to fester in their mind. I'm going to use the word fester because they can pop in their mind, but they will not fester. So let's read here. Nevertheless, in the case of his desire for something forbidden, it does not cross his mind to actually violate the prohibition or to fail to observe a positive commandment, God forbid. Rather, they remain as mere thoughts of sin, which are worse than sinning itself. The Bainani cannot stop thoughts of sin from popping into his mind, even though the notion of actually transgressing is far from him. And even when such thoughts do arise, he quickly pushes them out of his mind. These thoughts can cross his mind, leading to a distraction from Torah and worship. So you might be in the middle of prayer, and it might cross your mind. Everybody's daydreamed, right? Something crosses your mind, and it disturbs you. It's a very disturbing life. As our sages of blessed memory are taught, each day there are 3 sins from which a person cannot save himself: thoughts of sin, failure to concentrate during prayer, etc. The Tanya does not cite the Talmud's third example of a sin committed daily by the average person, which is a borderline slander, since this is an activity of speech, a faculty of which the Beinoni has indeed achieved full mastery, but sinful and distracting thoughts will still pop into his head, both during the day and sometimes during prayer. I'm not going to get into that, but the point is that we will every day have thoughts of doing a sin, and we will every day be disturbed in our prayer. Something will come to our mind, and we will be disturbed. Our mind will be disturbed, and we will think of doing a sin. But as we said, the Beinoni never actually does the sin. Again, I want to reiterate, why is this important to us? Because this is ultimately our goal. Let's take, for example, let's take an area of our life. Let's make it practical, okay? Let's take an area of our life. Let's say I want to work on treating people nicer. So, we can start off with giving people charity. From there, I can move up to speaking to people nicely. But the Tanya will tell you, on top of that, you also have to work on thinking about people nicer. It's not enough, if your goal is to work on yourself and about treating people nicely, you have to work also on your thoughts of people, not just your actions, not just your speech, but also on your thoughts. And that will apply to any area of your life. Working on our thoughts are as important. Well, I don't want to say the word as important. They're all important, okay? But working on our thoughts is an area of which God expects that we shouldn't be able to have control. In other words, wherever we have the ability to have control, God expects us to work on that, and that includes our thoughts. So if we have the ability to work on our thoughts, in other words, yes, I may have moments where a thought comes to my mind to think bad about somebody else, but I have to be able to stop it in its tracks. Once that comes up, I stop and I say, no, I don't want to think about that. I don't want to have those negative thoughts fester in my mind about that person. Many of us have this, by the way. Many of us have where we're outstanding individuals where we won't, God forbid, hurt other people even if we don't like them. Though we may talk to our friends about it, then we might become even better, and we'll stop talking to our friends about it. But then the higher level, as Tanya would tell us, is to stop thinking about it as well. Let's continue. So we want to know, how does the Beinoni successfully manage to control his thoughts? And we're going to tell you the trick that Tanya is going to expound upon in the later chapters. And he says, right, as he says, how does the Beinoni muster enough willpower to control every urge of his heart? And he says like this: rather, for this purpose of ensuring that the mind rules over the heart, on every occasion, the Beinoni benefits from the residual effects of meditative prayer in his brain that lingers after the prayers are completed. So this is what I said many times, is that the moment of prayer, which is a moment of extreme connection to God, even after you pray, you have a residual energy within yourself that helps you overcome everything during the day. If we look on the bar over here on the side, he gives a practical lesson. When you recite the Shema and pray, if you meditate to the point that you get excited about God, that energy will help you exert your willpower for the good during the rest of the day. So that is an important line. Knowing that our prayers are important not just for the moment, but they can help us for our entire day. And this is why prayer is so important. Prayer is meant to be in the beginning of the day, because it gives us the power to get through the rest of the day if we pray properly. And so that's, again, another important thing. He's mentioning here the Shema, because at the very least, even if you're not going to pray the whole prayers, take the Shema, take a prayer where you're going to meditate and connect to God. People think meditation is only for other religions. We've had discussions on meditation is also a Jewish thing. Exactly what Jewish meditation looks like is, was a JLI course. But nevertheless, you get the idea that we have to think deeply about God. Let it seep into our psyche so that it helps us exert our willpower during the rest of the day. Nice. Over here, the residual effects, and go to the bottom of the page. The residual effects of prayer are sufficient to stimulate his innate reverence of God and love of God, which remain hidden in the right chamber of his heart. Okay, so the residual effects of prayer are good to stimulate the innate love, which again is going to be a discussion for a later chapter. so that whenever the Beinoni feels a desire for self-gratification, he will be strong and triumph over this evil, preventing it from gaining control and dominance over his body, the small city, and from bringing its desire to fruition to influence the limbs of the body. And so again, this goes back to what I've been saying. The example I've been saying the whole day is, imagine you have the city, the enemy keeps attacking the city, but no missiles, no projectiles enter the city. You maintain control over the city, but the enemy keeps attacking. And just like in an army, you need to have the warriors need to be inspired to the mission of what they're fighting for. We need to be inspired of what we're fighting for, and for that we have prayer. Just saying I'm not going to sin, I'm not going to do the wrong thing alone gets boring after a while. You have to be inspired. Why don't you want to do that? So the answer of prayer will say, well, because I love God. I love God so much, I don't want to do anything wrong, right? Just like in a marriage, you don't want to do anything, you want to do the right stuff, or in a relationship with your children. If you have strong feelings of love, they will help you do certain actions. The residual effects of love and reverence of God during prayer help the Beinoni later on in the day, not only with his inner struggle against speaking or doing something inappropriate, but also in his particularly challenging war against sinful thoughts. And even the residual effects of prayer help the Beinoni not sin even in the mind alone, to have bad thoughts, because the evil on the left side of the Beinoni's heart does not have the control nor dominance to overcome the willpower of his brain to make and contemplate such as, God forbid. So I'm sorry I'm going fast. Again, a lot of this is repetition to stuff we've said in the last classes, only because that's how we had to present it. But it's interesting he pointed out that the Beinoni's biggest struggle is in his mind. When you think about it, it's true. To prevent actions is, I would say, one of the easiest things we do in our lives. Preventing speech is a little harder, right? And preventing thought is even harder. I think the reason is because in our lives, our thoughts, I think we recognize that our actions are the most sinful. So it automatically gives us a certain leg up in that battle where we decide not to do those sins. Thoughts, we feel like it's not really a sin, so we say it, and speech, we don't feel it's such a big sin, so we say it, and then thoughts especially. So that's why I believe that the battle in thoughts is the hardest. All right, so he says like this: it stops him from willingly embracing this bad thought, God forbid, which is written involuntarily from his heart to his brain, as mentioned above. All right, so we're saying that you don't embrace the bad thoughts in your mind because the residual effects of prayer help you. And as he says, rather, as soon as the bad thought reaches his mind, he dismisses it vigorously with two hands, i.e., as soon as he realizes that it is a bad thought, he averts his mind from it and thinks about something else, and he refuses to willingly embrace the thought. So that's another important point. How do you get rid of bad thoughts? It's not by not thinking about something, it's by thinking about something else. That is why it's so important, another reason, to fill our minds with Jewish thoughts and Jewish study. Because if you want to have positive thoughts, you need to have what to think about. If you don't have what to think about, then you cannot replace the other thoughts with something else. Also, it's an interesting thing. People talk about being a prisoner to their own mind, to our thoughts. Just as an aside, it says that who is truly free? He who studies Torah. Torah is a very powerful study that allows us to think about it even when we're going through difficult parts of our lives. The Torah, for anybody who's ever studied it in depth, it's just a wonderful, wonderful way. And I don't want to call it an escape. It's not an escape, because when you study Torah, you're thinking about when you study Torah, you're thinking about such deep and important ideas. And studying Torah connects you to God. It's a mitzvah in itself. So I don't want to call studying Torah an escape. Studying Torah is an important thing. And studying Torah is a mitzvah. And therefore we say someone who studies Torah is the ultimate free person. Because no matter what you're going through in your life, And usually whatever we're going through in our lives mostly is our minds that drive us crazy, right? When we're going through difficult periods in our life, the hardest part about what we're going through is what's going through our mind, right? The situation, well, you can react to any situation in different ways. And so therefore it's our mind that's the hardest. And therefore the only true free person is when you can step back and study Torah. Because when you study Torah, you are going into a spiritual realm, a spiritual world, and so to speak, leaving behind all your traumas and issues. King David writes about this. He says, your Torah was a joy for me in the times of my trouble. King David had many troubles, many difficulties, and yet he said during his time when he was able to study Torah, he was able to, at that point, escape his issues. And so I'm just bringing that out here because we're saying, how do you escape bad thoughts? It's by thinking good thoughts. Well, in order to have a good thought to go to, you have to have good thoughts. That's why it's important, as I said, study Torah, study the mitzvahs, that allows us to give the ability to escape our bad thoughts. Someone wrote something here. I'm gonna discuss it soon. Okay, let's continue here. He says, okay, so we said that the Beinoni pushes away bad thoughts. He refuses to willingly embrace it or even to willingly fantasize about it, and certainly not to consider actually doing it. So I want to go back to those lines. He said a couple things, right? Sinful thoughts include all these different things. You can embrace a thought, right? So let's say, for example, it comes to your mind, Joe Schmo, he's terrible, right? That comes to your mind. And your mind says, yeah, just last week he did X, Y, and Z. That's called embracing the thought. That's already a bad thought. That's already, a Beinoni would not do that. Beinoni in his mind will come, oh, Joe Schmo, he's a really bad guy. Either you find a way to think something good about him or you think about something else. All right, then the next step, he says, not even to fantasize about it deliberately. All right, fantasizing, we understand. You fantasize all types of sinful thoughts. And then he says, certainly not to consider actually doing it, right? So sometimes we actually consider doing the sin, even if we never end up doing it, right? Let's say I fantasized about doing something wrong, peer pressure, or people walked around, so I ended up not doing it. But we have to understand that considering doing it is also a problem too. And I'll tell you a little secret. Even if you weren't studying it, Tanya, eventually, if you consider doing something wrong, you'll eventually do it. So even from a very humanistic level, it should be a problem. But all these things really are a problem, right? If you embrace any of these ideas, if you embrace the bad thoughts about somebody, or you fantasize about bad, or you consider actually doing something bad, ultimately they will affect what you're going to do over the long term. It's almost impossible to have thoughts going one way and your actions going another. I've mentioned this, I used to study with a psychologist, and he told me, we look at people, people say all the time, well, that person snapped. And he says, it's very rare people actually snap. He says, usually they've had crazy thoughts going through their minds for a long time before they went ahead and do what they did. That's usually what it is. You always hear them say, oh, I knew him. He was the nicest person. He was the kindest person. I never had a bad word to say. Possible, but most likely in that person's mind, there was a lot going on. And ultimately, if we delve into any of these thoughts in any of these three different ways, whether embracing it, whether fantasizing, or whether considering actually doing it, they will have an effect on us. Let's continue. So he says like here, for someone who deliberately fantasizes is classified as a rasha at that moment. And as we learned at the beginning of this chapter, the Beinoni never allows himself to become a rasha, a wicked person, even for a single moment. The Beinoni's self-control extends over both his personal religiosity and his behavior towards others. Okay, so we would be called, so I think we can all honestly say that we are classified by the Tanya as a rasha, a wicked person. But again, what I want to get from this chapter is we're all trying self-improvement, even if we're not going to self-improve our entire lives at one moment. But we're not done the class. I'm just taking a break between this and the last part of the class, which is a little bit of a separate idea, although it's connected. But we all are trying to develop ourselves, becoming better people, becoming better servants of Hashem and servants of God. And in that, it's important to know what our goal is. And so, yes, we work on our actions. By the way, sometimes before you work on your actions, maybe work on your thoughts is actually better. It actually, a lot of times we think, oh, well, I should work on my actions. I'm not going to negate starting from the point of actions, but there's also an idea of starting from the point of thoughts, because our thoughts have a big deal on our actions. So I guess kudos to all of you for coming to the Tanya class every single week, because by coming to the Tanya class every week, you are doing really what the Tanya is going to tell you to do, which is to work on our thoughts. Chabad, mind, heart, actions. Now, of course, the Tanya tells us, of course, even if you don't feel something, to do the right thing anyways, and we have that ability like the Beinoni, right? The Beinoni has the evil inclination, but can nevertheless choose to do the right thing. But the long-term success we can have in our lives comes from using our thought process. That's what the Tanya is going to describe to us. That's the long-term success that we can have. The Rebbe would tell people, of course, and of course we know this is the Chabad movement, to get people to do actions, put on tefillin, do one mitzvah. And so people mistakenly think Chabad is not big into, the thought process, whereas other kiruv groups, other groups jump right away and say, hey, come to a Torah class, and then they try and convince you to do the actions. And Chabad, we usually start with the action. That does not mean we negate any of the thoughts, but as the Rebbe used to say many times, he says, a lot of times you need to do an action in order to help appreciate the thoughts. In other words, you could think about tefillin forever, for example, or think about lighting Shabbos candles. Sometimes after we do the action, then when we study about it, it actually becomes more meaningful. So I do want to make everybody aware that, there's an idea of starting from the thoughts, but you can do it in conjunction with the actions. And you can also start with the actions first as well, because, the example I like to bring is like if you have a patient who's having mental health issues, and you prescribe to them a pill that would help them. I'm not getting into whether they do or don't help, and that's the discussion for another time, but assuming they help, assuming this pill will really help, but the patient doesn't want to take it. But that's because the patient is not in a good mental place, so they don't appreciate they need to take that pill, right? But once they take the pill, then they'll actually understand why they need it, okay? Again, I'm not getting into whether people should or shouldn't take pills, discussion for another time. It's a parable, it's an example. So in our lives as well, if I want to understand Shabbat, I can study about Shabbat for a year. Or you know what, you can experience Shabbat and then study about it. Or study and experience it. You can do both at the same time. And that is just some of the ways that we can gradually gain control of ourselves and develop ourselves to become better people. Okay, someone wrote here, last week I heard something that, if true, tells a lot about the character of someone that I considered a new friend. And to be honest, although I don't know if what I heard is true or false, that is in my head and is bothering me somewhat. Okay, so basically you're saying that you heard something about someone you consider a friend, and it's bothering you because you're not sure if what the person said is true or not. So here we come to, there's actually a commandment in the Torah. Actually, I don't know what, sorry, I shouldn't say something. I'm not sure where it is. It says, have they done us kol adam b'kaf. You have to judge every person favorably. You have to judge every person favorably. What that means is that, whatever you hear or see about people, should be, you have to find a way that it's favorable for them. The Talmud actually gives an extreme example of this. The Talmud says there was once a rich person. He had a guy working for him for 7 years. When the guy left, he says, give me the money. He says, I have no money. So he says, all right, so give me your property. He says, I have no property. He says, give me your clothes. I have no clothes. A whole long thing. And the guy left. And like 2 months later, the rich man showed up to the worker's house with all the money that he owed him. And basically, he asked the servant, like, you left without making, well, he asked the worker, he says, you left without making a big deal. Why is that? Then he basically, the Talmudic story was how he had judged his boss favorably, and everything that he said was true. He says, I thought, maybe you put down all your money as a security for investments or whatever. So basically something like that. And the truth was, it was true. He actually at that moment had no money. Of course, later when his money was untied, he did pay him back. So the point is that judging people favorably in the Talmud is shown as taken to a very big extreme. The question that we have to ask ourselves is, so does that mean I have to be an idiot? Does that mean that I should just let people, run all over me? Does that mean I'm going to make myself vulnerable to people treating me in terrible ways, and I can't say anything because I'm judging them favorably? It's a good question. It's a very good question. And you know what? Before we get to that question, we're going to add another question. This is from today's Tanya. And these are good questions. And I'm not sure I really fully have the answer, is really what I'm going to tell you. I have thoughts, but I don't necessarily have the answer. Well, let's take a look at the next part of Tanya, also about interpersonal relationships. And this is about treating people who treat you like dirt, treating them nicely. Okay, this is what we're going to say. Again, so you might ask, so does that mean I should let people treat me like dirt? Well, if you read the literal text that we're going to read here, it sounds like it. Sounds like you should let people run all over you and treat them nicely. So we're going to read. Let's read here. The Beinoni's self-control extends over both his personal religiosity and his behavior towards others. Also in human relationships, the Beinoni exhibits complete self-control. As soon as the thought of ill will or hatred, God forbid, rises from his heart to his mind, or any thoughts of envy, anger, resentment, etc., he categorically refuses to embrace these thoughts in his mind or with his will. So again, you have a thought of anger. Someone did something wrong to you, you're angry at them, or resentment. You categorically refuse to embrace. Notice the word embrace. You categorically refuse to embrace those thoughts. They might come to you, but you don't embrace them. However, in this case, it is not sufficient for the Beinoni to merely repress his negative thoughts. He also needs to act in a contrary fashion. On the contrary, it is his mind that controls and dominates the inclinations of the heart to do the exact opposite, to act in a kind way towards the individual, showing him extra affection. So imagine this. Someone embarrasses you, someone does terrible things to you, and you treat them nicely. Even if another person acts abominably, the self-mastery of the Beinoni demands a positive, loving response, devoid of any anger or resentment. But is there any limit to the degradation the Beinoni is required to suffer before seeking some retribution? And the answer is no. It's crazy. It's crazy. It's crazy. Really, we're reading this. This is crazy. Let's continue. He should tolerate the antagonistic to the extreme limits without becoming angry, God forbid. And also to refrain from repaying the antagonist his just deserts, even for the sake of justice and not out of anger. For this would violate the prohibition not to take revenge nor bear a grudge against the members of your people, God forbid. Rather, on the contrary, repay the guilty with positive acts. I'm not going to read that paragraph yet. But so far he's saying you have to repay, you have to treat the person who treated you terribly in the best way possible. Now he's going to bring here from, I think it's from Tanya in another place. But what's the mystical underpinnings behind this thought process? How is it possible that someone treats me so bad and I treat them nicely? Why do I have to treat them nicely? They're evil. Just like this. You are the, he says like this. This is the commentary, by the way, but he says like this. You are the worst. He says, first of all, I'll put the word first of all. You are the worst judge if someone has wronged you, since personal bias is so strong. So this is just putting it out there. First of all, before you're sure someone wronged you, don't be too sure. That's an important point. But, all right, putting that aside, if you could be genuinely assured that somebody has been unfair to you or caused you harm, wouldn't a measured response be appropriate, right? This is a discussion today, right? We talk about the proportionate response. I'm not getting into that, okay? If someone wronged you, that misfortune was meant to happen to you regardless of who perpetrated it. Your antagonist happened to volunteer for the job, but if he would not have done so, God would have found another willing agent to do his work. For reasons that you probably cannot fathom, that perceived misfortune was a necessary experience in the evolution of your soul. As the sages put it, everything that God does is for the good. So ironically, you should be grateful to your antagonist for sending you an experience which was valuable to you. Of course, that was not the antagonist's wish, but if someone really helps you, you ought to repay them for the real value of their actions and not their motives. They might say, Rabbi, that's crazy. So someone does something terrible to me. Now I have to thank them. You are going to thank you so much for screwing me over. Thank you so much for ruining my business. I'm so happy. But the Tanya is saying, no, we have a belief, and our belief tells us that nobody can do anything wrong to you. And if something happens to you, it means it was meant to happen to you. It happens to be that this person volunteered to do it, to be God's agent. But if that person had done, someone else would have done it to you. So you cannot ascribe your misfortune to that person. So let's take an example. Let's say someone goes to the government, goes to the police, gets you in big trouble. Nevertheless, you cannot view that it's that person that's causing you the problem. It's God that's bringing it upon you. That person happens to be the agent. And if we want to take it a step further, if we believe that nothing bad happens, then misfortune is really a good thing. And now he's going to bring in a practical example to this that we studied in the Torah these past weeks. As is stated in the Zohar, we should learn from Joseph the way he treated his brothers. Right? Remember, Joseph, I don't have to read it inside, but you know the story, right? Joseph was sold by his brothers into slavery. But ultimately, because he was sold into slavery, he became the second to the king in Egypt. He became the viceroy. And so when his brothers showed up at his doorstep, they thought he was going to take revenge. And he told them no. He told them, you meant to do bad to me, but God meant it good. And it was all God's. I'm going to treat you well. You actually did me a favor. You sold me into slavery. You brought me all these riches. You made me viceroy of Egypt. God made this plan. It was God's plan. And therefore, Joseph not only did not treat his brothers harshly, he actually took care of them. He did good things to them. I do want to say, by the way, the commentaries mention that after Joseph's father passed away, he wasn't necessarily buddy-buddy with his brothers, but he still treated them well. And so I'm just going to add that as a caveat to this whole discussion here. And even if we're going to go to that extreme, which is a hard one to swallow, but even if we're going to go to the extreme, that we are going to treat people who wronged us nicely, it still doesn't mean I have to be their friend. And it still doesn't mean if there's a case to bring in court against them, I wouldn't bring a case in court against them, right? Still doesn't mean if I could bring justice against them, I wouldn't bring justice against them. But there's nothing personal. And if that person right now was starving and needed bread, I would give them bread. If that person right now needed something, I would help them. In fact, the Tanya, there's a tradition that goes along with the Tanya, that the Alter Rebbe, when he wrote this part of the Tanya, he said he actually had in mind a certain chassid of his. He had a certain follower, one of his chassidim, called Reb Sender. Reb Sender was a very wealthy man. And one day, somebody who didn't like him, I have to hear the story. I don't know exactly who it was, but anyways, Reb Zalman. So again, there was a guy called Reb Sender. So Reb Sender was very wealthy, and one day one of the people in the town was jealous of him and made some libel against him in the government, and he lost all his money. But many years later, Reb Sender made back his money, and one day the guy that ruined him the first time showed up to his doorstep asking for money, and he gave him a lot of money. So that's an example of what we're describing here. And Joseph is another example of what we're describing here. So I guess what I'm splitting here is we have choices in our lives of who to be friends with. And of course, we want to fraternize with a good crowd. The Talmud itself tells us we should. And therefore, someone who does bad things and certainly goes to the government against me, I don't have to be their buddy, but nevertheless, I can treat them kindly, just as Joseph treated his brothers kind. Someone's writing here, Joseph was first treating his brothers unfairly. But discussion for another time, but he wasn't treating them in a vindictive way. He was testing them to see if they had done teshuvah, but that's another discussion. There's many commentaries to explain that, but regardless, our understanding of the story is that he was never treating them unjustly in a vindictive way. If he ever treated them unjustly, which he did, it was to help them do teshuvah. Regardless, this is a very complex topic. These are interpersonal topics, which automatically mean they're complex. And I'm not going to say I have all the answers, and every case is going to be different, but the general idea that we have to understand in our lives is that thinking bad about anyone is wrong. There are certain truths we know about people. They may be true. We have to recognize it, right? In other words, if I can't know the truth about somebody, then, right, for example, the Mishnah says you should have, pick for yourself good friends. Well, if I don't ever think bad about anybody, how do I pick good friends? I think there's a difference between thinking bad about people and understanding who people are. I'm not sure I can draw that distinction, but I am. The other thing, as I mentioned, I want to mention how we judge people. Our judgment is always very off, so we have to be very careful about our judgment. And also, we never judge people the way we judge ourselves. You know, if we were to find out things about ourselves, how would we look at ourselves? Think about that deeply. Imagine you made that same mistake in your life. How would you want people to look at you? We tend to judge other people harsher, so that's another thing to think about in judging our friends. But the most important thing is that no matter what happens between you and another person, there's never an excuse not to be cordial, not to say hello, not to say good morning, not to say shalom aleichem, and walk around without hate in your heart to those people. I'll just end up with this, is that I remember when I was in yeshiva, I know that Chabad in California was established by three great Chabad luminaries, three great Chabad rabbis, and they all had different ideas of how to conquer the states, so to speak. And what I heard was that they would be in vicious fights, if you want to call it that. Okay, they would be in big fights about what should be done and how it should be done on a very practical level. But it says every Shabbos they would get together and they would eat shalom together. So what that means was that, you know, there's, so to speak, there's business, but they never had any personal antagonism. There was no personal issues, no interpersonal issues. They were able to see each other as people. In business, we may have disagreements, we may have different ways of going about this, and you should do it this way and I should do it that way. But we have to be able, at the very least, with anybody, well, I should say at least Jewish people, obviously we have enemies in the world. I'm not going to say you should cozy up, eat shalom with Hamas, but we should be able to, or of course recognize anybody that's trying to destroy you. It's Jewish as well, unfortunately. But you know, don't eat shalom with a murderer. But generally, the idea is that we have to be able to, at the very least, treat other people with respect, even if we heard from other people that they said bad things about us, they don't like us, to give people, and always recognizing that anything that anybody does is it's their issues, and whatever happens to you in your life is coming from God. And I always say it like that. Whatever other people have done to you, it's their issues, it's their problems. They have to deal with it with God. And the bad that comes to you is all coming from God, and accept that and move on. And honestly, it's a more peaceful life to live life that way. I'm gonna stop here just because it's 1 o'clock. It's 1:02. This discussion could go on for a long time. And if anybody has more follow-up questions, I'm not sure I have the answers, but I honestly, I'd be very interested in looking these up, because this class brings up a lot of questions. It brings up a lot of questions, and I hope you do have a lot of questions and on this topic. And I hope that you send me some questions, because these are very complex problems. So with that, I will wish you all a good day. And thank you for coming.
Yes, Rabbi.
And we'll see you next Tuesday, God willing.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Don't forget Friday is a fast day on the Jewish calendar. So a reminder for everybody, Friday morning till you make Kiddush is a Jewish fast day commemorating the siege of Jerusalem many years ago.
Thank you, Rabbi. Question. Can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah, I'm open for questions. It has to be quick because I have to run in 2 minutes, but yes.
Yes, no, I have somebody about to pull up into my driveway that had a 1 o'clock appointment with me, so I have to go to. The 24th of February, that's the Mafter, just the Mafter he's reading, right? My friend's asking me?
Yeah.
Just the Mafter.
Yeah, unless I mean, if he wants to do more, he could do more.
Oh my gosh. The Mafter, he said to me, is like 4, 5, 6 minutes, depending on how you read. I'm having a nervous breakdown about that.
Okay, no, Mafter should be only 2 minutes.
Please, thank you. Okay, talk to you soon.
Okay.
Bye.
All right, bye. All right, anybody else? I've got 2 minutes.
Rabbi, I guess this discussion, as I had pointed out before, might not include people such as Hamas.
That's correct. I even mentioned
that would be difficult to
yeah, even if somebody's Jewish, obviously, you know, if any law conflicts with another law, you know, you have to look at the laws. I mean, the general law is if someone's trying to kill you, you kill them first. You know, that would apply, unfortunately, even if it was a Jewish murderer.
Wow, I didn't know that. Interesting.
Yeah, Jewish law is preemptive, actually, preemptive strikes.
Mm.
Yeah. It says, Habar lahargach, someone comes to kill you, hashkem lahargo, get up early and kill them first. The Rabbi used to talk about this all the time. That's what we did in the 6-Day War. Unfortunately, we didn't do it in the Yom Kippur War, and we paid for
Yeah.
it.
Right, exactly. Oh, thank you. Always learn something new with you, so thank you.
Sure, thank you, thank you. Thank you. Okay.
Have a good week, everybody.
Good week. Have a good week, everybody. Anybody else, or we're good?
Hi, Rabbi.
That's it? Okay. We'll see you. Bye.